So if you're listening right now and you've been struggling with discouragement or stress or anxiety or disappointment, or maybe this year has just knocked the wind out of you and left you paralyzed, just realize that that John Gordon, that every single person speaking to you, that I have, all of us have faced this year, have had times where we just didn't know if we could make it through that day. There are days where negative thoughts have flooded into our minds, and there have been times we faced discouragement and struggle, and yet it's moments like these that we need to be breathed into, to be encouraged, to be inspired, to find our courage once again. So John, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. You know, I'm always a yes with you. And here I am in Los Angeles, California. We're actually in Hollywood, on Hollywood Boulevard right now. And it seems like from this context, one of the most appropriate things to talk about is creativity, and especially creativity when it comes to self-leadership and organizational leadership. It was probably, oh my gosh, over 10 years ago in 2008 during the recession that I felt that I needed to start a company, that I needed to find a way to create jobs. That I watched so many people lose their jobs, lose their careers, lose their futures. And here I was in LA where tens of thousands of people were watching their dreams come to an end. There were just so many people who felt like their lives had just crashed and burned. Before the recession, in 2007, there was a writer's strike, so Hollywood was already paralyzed. So many of my friends were already financially just really struggling, and their worlds were so unstable. And it was in the middle of that crisis that I started McManus Studios. It's when we dove into the world of fashion and film and tech and publishing and all these different arenas. And we watched how an idea, a dream, a passion, a burden actually grew into a company and provided income for so many individuals and families. And it was a great story until it wasn't. Around 2011, without going into too much detail, my business partner made some decisions that brought the company careening. And it was such a shock because a lot of times companies come to an end because of failure, but we were coming to an end because of success. We had our best quarter. We were thriving financially. Our different sections of our company were just absolutely crushing. We had a commercial that was actually rated #1 in the country by ad rate during the Super Bowl. We won an award in the fashion industry. We were making suits in Portugal and bags here in the United States and journals in China. And it just was this beautiful dream that all came to a crash. And if you've ever had a dream that just came to a sudden end, or if you ever found yourself feeling as if life just knocked the breath out of you, that's what it was like for me around 2010, 2011. I took on so much in that moment that I couldn't eat for 30 days. I lost probably 25, 30 pounds, which in the end was actually really good for me. But you're not supposed to lose weight because of stress and anxiety. And during that time, I had to reevaluate where I was, because I was in the middle of a crisis, and it was a personal crisis and an organizational crisis. And what I decided to do was to dive back in, that I needed to find some place to use my creativity, my imagination, to find a way to, in a sense, to rebuild those leadership muscles that believed that a better future could always be created. And some of the best years of my life came out of that crisis. But sometimes we have these little memorials to our past, to our failures, and to our scars, our wounds, our disappointments. I've had a warehouse in downtown LA for 10 years filled with vintage material that I refuse to get rid of. My wife sometimes has actually sold my material without me knowing it. I had to stop, I had to intervene and say, we're not getting rid of this stuff. And I have all this vintage World War II material, and it smells terrible. I mean, it is just so nasty until it's processed. You don't even want to be around it. But I just always knew that out of the material of one of my failures in my past would come the material from which I could actually begin to create a new dream. So then 2020 hits. I mean, the world just falls apart, it seems. We have this global pandemic. COVID-19 paralyzes global economies. Nations come to a screeching halt. our own nation then has a national quarantine. And I live in California, and in California I live in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles I live in Hollywood. And I don't know if there's any place in America that would have any more of a serious lockdown in place. And so from our governor to our mayor, we've watched everything close down. We've gone down Melrose Boulevard and Beverly Boulevard, and we see shop after shop after shop that's closed down. We see buildings boarded up and places that have been graffitied and destroyed due to the rioting and the looting that took place during the turmoil in our society with issues of social injustice and police brutality and the need for racial equality and all these things that are going on. And frankly, I've seen it not only in my family, but in my friends and our community. People are just overwhelmed. They just feel paralyzed. They're exhausted. They're tired. They're struggling with depression and anxiety, and it doesn't seem to be getting better. So what I decided to do in the middle of this, and somehow I knew from the very beginning, I told my wife, this is when I have to create. That when there's crisis, you can either be paralyzed by that crisis, or you can actually be motivated by the crisis. And one of the things that I've learned historically is the best time to create is actually in crisis. Because a crisis is this destabilization of everything that you think was guaranteed. A crisis causes so much tumultuous experiences to happen that you wonder how the future is going to look. And so you can either become a passive passenger into a chaotic, unknown future, or you can actually become a pioneer and an explorer to create a different future. And so what I try to convince people is whenever you're in crisis, this is a great time to begin to generate and to exercise your creative juices. This is a great time to look around and say, what are things that I've wanted to create that I never had time to create? Or what are things I've wanted to create that I never had the courage to create? What's something I wanted to do that I've always put on hold? And so I stepped back over 2020 and I looked at 5, 6, 7 different business endeavors, looked at different kind of entrepreneurial opportunities. And I have to tell you, I've had several ideas that I thought were going to go and they did not go. Several places where I put time and energy and money and resources, and it didn't go. And it would be easy to go, well, nothing can really happen during this time. And it'd be so easy to look at all the failed attempts and all the failed efforts and say, I just need to just tap out and just wait until all this is over and ride out the storm, and then I'll start rebuilding my life. But I just want to tell you that when you do that, you become the victim of your environment rather than the creator of your future. It's so important to never lose sight of your creative capacity. It's so important to realize that what's incubating inside of your soul, inside of your mind, inside of your imagination, inside of your dreams are actually these pilot projects of your imagination, letting you know what kind of future you could create. So one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to create beautiful things. When I was young, I struggled with depression. In fact, by the time I was 12 years old, I was in a psychiatric chair. And when I look back at that time in my life, all I remember is feeling like life was just so heavy, and I just felt so overwhelmed by life. And I couldn't go to sleep at night because I was so depressed. I didn't want to wake up in the morning because I didn't want to face the world around me. And one of the things that I began to do is I began to systematically train myself to see beauty all around me. And I would get up and I would just begin to look at sunrises, or begin to look at flowers, or begin to look at oceans, or I would just find beautiful things around me. And in fact, I would challenge myself to try to find beauty in ordinary things, in the common. And I know it sounds crazy, but I would look for designs in concrete. And then I worked in landscaping when I was young, so I would begin to design landscaping patterns and the different lawns that we'd mow, and the businesses where we'd mow their lawns. And so I would just start working on rock formations and sand formations. And a lot of it was because I wanted to train myself not only to see beauty, but to create beauty, to look for the beautiful in the mundane. And this is a part of the creative process. And one of the places where I love creating is in this world of fashion. And so this year, I began to put the pieces together and just commit to myself that even if I only created one piece, I was going to design one piece. I was going to create one piece that I would wear, or that, and if it came together, that I would put out to the world, and just make one thing that was really beautiful to give people a sense of inspiration, to give them a sense of hope. And so I began to work on this theme that nothing's wasted. And some of it was generated from several different arenas. I was at this event in Carmel, and I was listening to this photographer, and they explained how they were in the middle of the jungle somewhere, and there was an orangutan that died, and they showed us a photograph, and this orangutan died hanging over a log over a river, but it didn't fall over. And when they took that photograph, it was astonishing. But then what they explained is they took the orangutan, they moved it off the log and put it on the side of the river bank area. And then they came back a short time later to see what happened. And the complete orangutan was gone except for the skeleton. It had been eaten by ants and other insects. And the photographers explained the reason this happened is because in nature, nothing's wasted. And I thought this is so amazing because I'm a person who is a student of the Hebrew scriptures. And I was looking at the life of Moses, and I thought, here's a guy who didn't find his purpose till he was 80 years old. I mean, his life was a disaster till he was 80. I don't want to wait till I'm 80 to find my purpose and my intention in life. And you know, at 40, he kills a guy. He goes on the run. He lives in the desert. It just seems like everything in his life was a waste. And as I was reading this, I was looking at this redemptive narrative in history that not only with nature nothing is wasted, but even with God, nothing is wasted. And the reason the universe is created like this is because it's designed as a reflection of the values of God, that everything is created to create life, that everything, even when it dies, has the capacity to create the new. So what I wanted to make is a declaration that 2020 is not a waste of your life. That 2020 has not been a waste of your life. That no matter what you face, no matter what you've lost, no matter what you've been through, no matter how much pain you've experienced, that there's nothing wasted. And I did think there was one exception. I thought everything in the universe, everything that's created naturally has the capacity to create life. The one thing that would be the exception is plastic. And I thought, how curious that the one thing that doesn't know how to create life is something humans create. And I started looking at my own life and asking myself the question, are there things in my life that are in a sense plastic? That they're not real, they're not authentic, they're not genuine to who I am as a human being. Because if it's not real and genuine and authentic, if it's not truly human, then it's not going to create life. And so what I want to do in my own life is remove everything that's plastic. I want to stop creating things that are not true to who I am and true to the highest level of humanity that I should be expressing. And so I began to take that ethic and said, we're going to create a line that it declares that nothing is wasted. I'm going to take the past, this vintage material that is a reminder of my failure or of my pain, my disappointment. I'm going to bring it into the present. I'm going to bring my experience in this moment in 2020 and begin to create a perspective, a design. And then I'm going to connect it to the future. So I'm going to design some pieces that will inspire people to creativity and beauty and wonder and joy as they begin to believe in the future again. And so, by the way, I wanted to bring just a personal metaphor of this application. This is one of my first shirt jackets. These pants are actually made from vintage material. This is actually authentic World War II canvas. A soldier wore this when they sacrificed and risked their life for our freedom. And for me, this is just a way of reminding myself that you're never limited by your past. You're not trapped in your yesterday. You can live this moment with such powerful presence that this moment can be the material from which you can create your best future. And the best way to create your best future is to realize that the future isn't created out there. The future is created in here. That what you carry inside of yourself, if you're filled with fear and anxiety, if you're filled with bitterness and anger, then that's the kind of world you're going to create. But if you're filled with hope and joy, if you're filled with courage and love, if you're filled with compassion, if you're filled with a sense of beauty and wonder, that's what you're going to bring to the world. So if I can leave you with one thing in this positive leadership conference, is that you are a creative being, and everything humans touch will either create or destroy, because we have that kind of creative potential. And so what you need to do in the middle of your crisis is step back and reclaim who you are. You are created to create, and the future is waiting for you to make the choices that create the future that humanity desperately needs. For me, I don't want to just declare it. I don't want to just think it. I want to wear it. And I hope that you'll make choices as you go forward. They are a reminder to you every day that you are not limited by your circumstance. You are not defined by your failures. You cannot allow yourself to be overwhelmed by the crisis. But in the middle of the crisis, you should create. Create in crisis. That's how the future is created for everyone.